An unexpected verdict, a political earthquake, a blow to the establishment. In the second free election in Tunisia's history, voters have opted for outsiders to lead the country. The Electoral Commission has confirmed that little-known law professor and conservative candidate Saied is the frontrunner.
The voters sent a clear message, a completely new message. It's practically a new concept of the revolution. Normally, a revolution is against the legality in place, but this time it's a revolution within the framework of legality.
Saied is followed by media mogul and political outsider Sibel Karkus. The businessman is currently behind bars on suspicion of money laundering and tax evasion, but was allowed to run because he hasn't been convicted. Karoui denies any wrongdoing and says his imprisonment is an effort by authorities to silence him.
I voted because I want less corruption, less poverty, the return of the middle class. All we have now is very rich or very poor people.
After the Arab Spring uprisings in North Africa and the Middle East in 2010-2011, Tunisia is the only country to have made a peaceful transition to democracy. Economic success, however, has yet to materialize. Tunisia's GDP grew only 1.1% in the first half of this year, compared to 2.7% in the same period a year earlier. Inflation has risen to 7%, its highest level in nearly 3 decades, while the cost of living has jumped by 30% in the past 3 years. Unemployment levels remain above 15%, even though 1 in every 3 job seekers has a university degree. Analysts suggest this is one of the reasons voter turnout has dropped from 63% in 2014 to 45%, a sign of disappointment rather than disinterest.
I did not vote, I did not register to vote, and I will not vote. Why? Because politicians are thieves. They care only about their own interests and power. Do you think the future president will think of the people?
Saied and Karoui have both vowed to boost the struggling economy and to protect Tunisia from the terror attacks that have taken their toll on the tourism industry. The two will face off in a second round next month. Tunisia has made major political gains in recent years, and turning those gains into economic achievements will be the first challenge for the new president. Sibel Karkus, TRT World.
Well, for more on this, political analyst Med Dhia Hammami joins us now from Connecticut in the US. Welcome to Money Talks, Med. Now, to what extent was Tunisia's struggling economy an issue at these elections?
The situation with the economy had definitely an impact on the voter turnout. The fact that a large part of the Tunisian population was disillusioned from the political elite led to a low turnout with only 45%, which is lower than the last time in 2014. In addition to that, there was debate on topics like the free trade agreement with the EU that is currently negotiating, as well as other topics that are mostly related to foreign policy and economic relations with other countries.
Now, we've heard about rising unemployment and the rising cost of living in Tunisia, but can you just tell us more about just how bad the economic situation is in Tunisia right now?
Exactly. So one of the main reasons why the living cost increased during the last years is because of the depreciation of the currency. So basically, it's an important inflation that was caused mainly by the economic policies adopted under supervision of the IMF since 2013. During the last years, the average inflation rate was at around 6-7%, and the national currency lost around 30% of its value. So the Tunisian economy is no longer competitive as it used to be, as it used before, and the living standards crashed down. Similarly, the employment rate remains stagnant at the level of 15% overall and more than 30% for young graduates.
Now, as we know, the two political outsiders, the law professor Saied and the jailed media mogul Sibel Karkus, will now compete in a runoff vote at a date that's to be determined. But what are those two candidates promising to do in order to revive Tunisia's economy?
they have two different approaches. Nabil Karoui, who's a media mogul who was involved in cases of corruption, now in jail, is actually in favor of a more centralization of the power in the hands of the president. So he would like to include economic topics in his broad definition of national security and supervise everything on his own. It's unclear what kind of economic policy would he take. However, the candidate Saied didn't really develop that much his economic program. He's focusing much more on political reforms and change the amendment of the constitution and the electoral law. What we know from the media coverage that happened during the last 2 days, I would say, is that his orientations tend to be more leftist than Nabil Karoui, who's himself a businessman and who might have a more pro-business economic policies.
Interesting. Now, in your view, what needs to be done in order to turn around Tunisia's economy?
Well, one of the very first things that should be done is working on the re-strengthening of the national currency. It's really difficult to make the Tunisian economy competitive and to fight inflation that became uncontrollable with such a monetary policy that seemingly is uncontrollable. In addition to that, I don't think that a third IMF agreement that is not off the table would be beneficial for the Tunisian economy. In terms of fiscal policies, the Tunisian state needs definitely to rethink the way that is taxing the companies and individuals at the same time. There is definitely a large number of reforms that should be done. Difficult to summarize them in 1 minute, but I would say that none of the candidates who are running currently presented a coherent program that allows for the recovery of the Tunisian economy.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on the runoff vote when it does happen. Med Dhia Hammami, thank you so much for your analysis from Connecticut.